Okay, so hi, I'm Susan Norwell. First time I've ever used a hashtag teaching the whole person. So I have been really thinking about this topic for a long time, and I'm going to tell you a little story about why. So, what I want us to think about is that when we're teaching the whole person, we certainly have at Rett U done a lot to support the reading, the writing, the thinking, the learning of our individuals with Rett syndrome. I think we've done a really good job with that. We are working hard to include more PTs and OTs into our core of classes so that we can support parents with this body aspect. Certainly there's PT, OT, adapted chairs, mounts, lifts, walkers. That list could go on forever in terms of physical needs of the kiddos we work with. I think we've done an okay job here. Certainly I talk a lot about effective engagement. I talk about anxiety. But I think that we've been missing out on talking publicly about how our kids really need us to figure out what questions they might be asking about what's going on around them. The same as any other child would be asking questions, and that this part of the equation builds security for them, also helps them express emotions and get regulated around their emotions, and also helps them understand that their questions are important. And that when they are thinking about something, whether they can formulate the question or not, we're going to try to get at what they're asking us. Now, I'm going to tell you a short story. Don't be horrified by the picture. So what they imagine and then what is real. Let's look at that at two sides. So my daughter Katie was about 3 years old when my mom's sister died. And I said I was taking her to the funeral service. And my mom was like, oh, I don't know. I think she's too young. I don't think you should take her. I said, listen, Mom, life and death are a part of our lives. I think it'd be better for Katie to kind of have this experience before it's somebody really important in her life, like you or, Grandpa, or, it's just like this is a way for her to be part of this ritual we go through as a family. And I'll explain to her. Okay. So my mom calls me a couple of days later and says, very good news. It's going to be a closed casket. I think that'll be way easier for Katie. And I go, okay, fine. So we get there. Katie takes one look at the casket and starts hysterically crying. And I take her out. And of course, my mother is, trying her best not to say I told you so. And I get out to the vestibule and I say, Katie, what's wrong? And she said, oh my goodness, they must have chopped her up in little pieces to get her inside that casket. It's very short, Mom. Now, Katie had an immense amount of language. And I stopped for a minute and I thought, really, that closed casket did not serve us well. And I said to her, honey, what you're not seeing is that she's laying down on a really soft white pillow. And there's a pillow under her head, and she is laying down, and nobody cut her up. She immediately stops crying. She's happy as a clam. She goes in, and she's fine for the rest of the service. My takeaway from that is often what kids imagine is worse than what is real. And that when we don't tell them the story, when we don't tell them what they need to know in the moment, that they will make things up. And that's the story I want us to think about as we go through this. So, what are the biggest roadblocks that we have as professionals and that you have as parents in figuring this all out for a child with a complex disability like Rett syndrome? First of all, we're not bombarded by their questions. A lot of you don't have a Katie saying, oh my gosh, they must have cut her up to fit her in there. So that I could completely understand what she was thinking so I could address the misconception. We're not even sure sometimes what their questions are because they may not have the capacity yet. They may not have learned yet how to access and formulate questions on their language system. So how do we know what they want to know? How do we know that? And I have to say that oftentimes what we do for our kids with disabilities, we have this great need in us to protect them, kind of shelter them. I don't want to make their anxiety worse. I think they've got enough on their plates. They don't need a handle on knowing what's going on with Aunt Betsy and her cancer or whatever. And also, to be honest, it's really hard for us all to talk about hard things. We just don't like to talk about hard things. We would rather, as a people, I think, not talk about them and hope they just go away. But I think there's 3 areas we need to think about talking about. One would be their own disability. They need to have some understanding of their own disability. So I have stopped saying or letting people say breath holding. I say, no, it's not breath holding. It's their breath being held for them. It is part of their Rett syndrome that their autonomic nervous system even suffers from apraxia. And I say that in front of the child because I think they need to know they're not holding their breath. Somebody yelling breathe at them is just not going to make a difference. Death or loss or sickness in a family, whoa. If we don't bring them into this, then they are separated from the family rituals. They're hearing bits and pieces here and there, and yet they don't totally understand it. And I will tell you, when I totally don't understand it is when I feel the most anxious. And I don't even have an anxiety disorder. I just feel the most anxious when I don't totally get something. And then we've got world country issues. And I'm not here to make any kind of political statement at all. But I'm saying if you're going to pick a year, 2020 is one of those years where we have got enough issues swirling around us. And it's really hard to hide things from any kid. And I'll tell you, it's really hard to hide things from our kids because they are really good listeners. And y'all know what I'm talking about because you can tell a little joke and all of a sudden it's your kid that's laughing and you didn't even direct it toward them. Okay, their own disability. I think it's really important to explain apraxia and label those moments as they're occurring. Oh my gosh, I see you working so hard and your body is not just letting you get to me. Your body's not letting you get to your device. I had a little girl that I just worked with a couple of days ago who has Rett syndrome and CVI, cortical visual impairment. And I said to her, and was having, I could tell, a really apraxic day. And I said, honey, I can tell you are really trying. You're really trying. And your body is holding you back. And you know what she was able to do? And this was kind of amazing because she was really having an apraxic moment. She's got on her device to want to. And I said, I know that you want to do it. I know that. This is not you trying to get away with not doing your work. You're not trying to pull the wool over my eyes. You want to. I'm telling you that this broke me. That just broke me. Because how many times in the past at school has somebody said, oh, you just don't want to do this, or you're just not trying, or you need to try harder. I don't know how you try harder not to be apraxic. It's impossible. Explain their apraxia to them. Label those moments because that helps them not feel like it's their fault, and it helps them feel like you are understanding of what it's like for them. I have a saying called the breath bandit. I have some kids with some immense breath holding episodes. And I say, oh my gosh, if I ever meet that breath bandit, I am going to be like, take a switch to him. I just don't like it. And I watch my wording. I do not say they are breath holding. They are not breath holding. Are they having a breath holding episode? Yeah, their breath is being held for them. And when it's hard, when it's a hard day like this, I'm just so sorry. I wish I could fix it so your body didn't do that. I know you're not doing it. It's part of your Rett syndrome, and it makes it hard. But I know in a minute you are going to get that breath is going to come back, and you are going to keep working hard as ever. And for sure they do. Because somebody's recognized what they're going through and isn't saying to them, come on, breathe, let's go, let's get going. I saw you try to get to this, and then I saw what happened. I saw you trying to get to that, to say something to me, and then your body got taken away from you. What I'm recognizing there is their effort. And I really believe that by talking to them about what is their disability interfering with them versus them interfering with them. And I'm not saying they're perfect and that they don't ever have moments where they just say, hey, I'm not doing this. But I'm saying if we mix up the two, we're going to have a kid who's not feeling very good about themselves. So I'm going to tell you a story. I'm in a little podunk town in Texas. I am telling you, little town, 900 people, 300 people in the school. There is not even a restaurant, except the lady there told me, there's a mighty fine grill at the gas station. I'm like, oh, I don't eat meat. I think I'll pass on that grill at the gas station. But I am working with this girl, and she's been fully included the whole time she's been in school. She's like 12, 13 years old. She's been watching kids do things her whole life that they can do. And when I teach her about writing and show her the alternate pencil, using the flip books, she writes out, am I lazy? L-A-Y-Z. Now, I know nobody told her she was lazy. This was a great place. I loved this school. I loved the special ed teacher that was trying to do her best with this child. Her family was amazing. But I realized she's a teenager looking around at everybody else who can do things. And I turned to her and I said, do you know that you have Rett syndrome? She looks at the no. I said, do you know what apraxia is? No. And I explained to her that her Rett syndrome meant that she had lots of ideas in her head. She knew lots of things. She just couldn't get them out. And that apraxia meant that her body was stopping her. Not her will, not her smartness, not whether she was smart or whether she wasn't smart, but it was this apraxia that was stopping her. And you could see her visibly relax, go back in her chair and breathe this huge sigh of relief. And I think about the fact that if somebody had, and again, no guilt, no fault, but if somebody had talked to her in the beginning about her disability, that's why I'm doing this little lesson right now. I think it's that important. That maybe she wouldn't have had that question about who she was and what kind of person she was. Maybe that would have been answered a long time ago. Death in the family. Please don't tell your kids they went to sleep. That's just a big no for all people, because then nobody's ever going to want to get in their bed and go to sleep again. Now, I do think it's a bit softer landing when we're dealing with deaths or cancer or sickness in a family. The kids understand it about someone that's not as close to them. I think that that's an important thing. Also, don't stop talking about the person as when they're dead. I mean, don't stop talking to them about the memories, because our kids develop memories. And I know I've dealt with death with a lot of my clients, and the death of grandparents particularly. And I will tell you that me being able to talk about the things they did with their grandparent, look at pictures of what they did with their grandparent, I think that's really important. I lost my mom a couple of years ago, and I will tell you that it makes me smile oftentimes when I think about things she said or things I'm doing that remind me of her. And I would hate if I didn't have a way to talk about those memories. And when you're little, you need somebody to help you talk about the memories. And as you get older and you're using a device, you're going to still need somebody to talk you through how to talk about those memories. And I'll tell you I have a story for everything. One of my adults that I work with lost her grandmother around the time I lost my mom. She was furious because they wouldn't let her go to the funeral. She expressed that to me. She was really angry. She was really close to her grandmother. And when I was meeting with her, I said to her, I'm modeling on her advice, that I was having a really hard time sleeping since my mom died. And she looked up at me and stared at me and then said on her device, me too. And I said, I think it's something that happens when you're mourning, when you're sad. She said, thought crazy. I said, oh, you thought you were going crazy? No, sweetie, you weren't going crazy. That's something that happens to people when they're sad and when they're mourning and when they're missing somebody. Now, world country issues. Boy, this is a hot topic, isn't it? Try as you might, they're going to hear something somewhere. Somebody said to me, well, I don't have the news on in my house. Well, do your kids ever visit other people? Do they ever get in a car with somebody else? Right now, you don't have to worry about them being on a bus, but I'm sure if they're on a bus, they're going to hear things from other kids. It's just the way it goes. And it's better for them to hear it from you. You would like to have your family values poured into your kids, not somebody else's values. What they don't know or what is hushed up is scarier for them. Remember Katie and my aunt's funeral. They will invent their own reality. And I will tell you that dealing with struggles or explaining struggles that exist helps them to build some emotional capacity for how to deal with things when things are tough. It helps them develop some self-advocacy. If they are going to ask questions, if they are going to stand up for themselves, are they going to have the ability to build some resilience around things that happen in our world at large, in our country at large, in our cities, in our family groups, in our schools? Things are happening all the time. And I think that when you hear bits and pieces, you're not getting the whole real story. And the bits and pieces can sometimes be a bit scarier than the whole story. So I think the best thing you could do is if they ask a question, answer it honestly. And do them a favor. I tend to build a clock. My husband always says when I'm explaining something, Susan, I just wanted to know the time. You didn't need to build the clock. And I know I'm like that. I tend to be very verbose. But I remember reading a joke once about a mom who was cleaning a closet. And she's got her head stuck in the closet, and her kid comes up behind her and says, "What's sex?" As you can imagine, she's like, oh man, my kids all ask me this question when I'm driving in the car. I don't quite understand that, but it seemed like a safe place, and we're far enough apart because I had a minivan. Maybe that made it more comfortable for them. But this mom sits back on her heels and says to her kid and kind of explains the whole thing to them. And then they present her with this form, and it says here sex, MF. The kid's trying to fill out a form and only wants to know if it's male or female. They didn't know what the MF stood for. So what we want to make sure is that we're actually answering the question they're asking and not what we think they're asking. And that's tough when you have nonverbal kids that are communicating with a device. I think it is really tough. But here's some things we can do. Ask relatives and friends, what if they have kids that are a similar age to your kids, what are they asking? What are they noticing? What's going on for them as we're going through COVID-19? What's going on for them when people are worried about their jobs and worried about getting sick? What's going on for them as they're hearing on the TV about people getting hurt and people marching? What is going on with the 3-year-olds? What is going on with the 4-year-olds? What's going on with the 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 12-year-olds? I'm telling you that it's very dependent upon what families are sharing with their kids, but I will tell you that my kids have a lot of questions. Discuss issues in little bites, not everything all at once. Little bites can be very, very helpful. And I'm not saying they should be glued in front of, the news, because I think there's too much on the news that's really graphic and horrible, and you need to be able to parse that out depending on the child and depending on how you feel about it too. I mean, this is your family decision. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm giving you some strategies and some things to think about. I think that books can be very helpful and therapeutic because it's something they can respond to that kind of takes them out of the real situation and makes it like once removed, which I think can be helpful. So in the handouts that I have for this, and I'm not sure, I think we'll probably post them on the website along with this little video, are some book lists. So the Read Aloud Revival book list actually has tons of book recommendations for lots of issues. Death in a family, moving, a new school, all kinds of issues that kids can be dealing with, racism. And our kids are sometimes people are prejudiced against them because of their disability. What I've been finding about a lot of my older kids is, as I've been reading stories about disabilities and kids with different disabilities and what they've done, my kids are really resonating with that, because one of them said her motto is don't stare, ask. And the kid was like jumping out of his seat, like, yeah. Like he wanted a bumper sticker that said that on the back of his backpack or something. The other one that I've been reading is the Scholastic free materials that we talked about at the very beginning when we were doing free lessons, which are going to end as of June 30th. So you might want to check them out soon. There is one about a young girl with a missing limb and how she's working to change perceptions of people. She actually made herself a prosthetic with a 3D printer that shoots sparkles, and how she's kind of taken this twist. And I think that, again, sometimes reading about other people with disabilities can be a really helpful thing, and it could have them start to open up about things that you might not know are percolating underneath there. And I think they do percolate. I do not believe our children are just listening to all of this and not trying and not struggling to figure it out. And I think erring on the side of protecting them can actually be more detrimental than erring on the side of maybe telling them a little too much. Because again, I fear for the kids that are going to invent their, am I lazy? Or, oh my gosh, they must have, chopped her up to put her in that casket. Mom, what's going on here? I think that oftentimes what they think up is worse than the actual reality. So hopefully this was helpful. Not exactly the lightest topic, I am sure, but I want to go back to the very beginning. And I want to emphasize the fact that if we're not teaching the whole person, are we teaching the person? I think that's the question we have to ask. I want my kids to be emotionally resilient, physically as capable as possible, socially integrated in their communities, have the mental stimulation so that they're learning to read and write, and develop this sense of ethics and compassion towards other people that they need to also give to themselves. When things on their bodies don't work, they need to have some self-compassion also. So anyways, thanks for tuning in. I am open to any questions, any comments, anything you want to throw my way, just let me know. My email is right here down at the bottom, susannorwell@rettu.org. And I got to tell you, I love all of you. Thanks so much.